This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
It's Golden Sense in full flight for the wire over Flashback, and Golden Sense have won the Santa Ana Derby.
Orb have won the Kentucky Derby. Forced to Kentucky.
Will take charges surging, and it's a photo finish. It's too close to call.
And Animal Kingdom wins the Dubai World Cup. Macho Man!
Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America on this Friday morning. It's Oaks Day, Derby tomorrow, so we have reached the pinnacle of the Derby Trail with things kicking off again on Oaks Friday, just in a little while with early post times both today and tomorrow at Churchill Downs. You heard on the Handicappers Report just a few moments ago. It has been announced via Twitter, hasn't been confirmed, I suppose, but it was announced according to a Marty McGee Twitter at the Racing Forum, so we'd have to think that's pretty good information. Pablo Del Monte will not run. Again, double check on that, but yesterday the connections were a little bit iffy when Opportunity scratched, or whether they would take advantage of that situation and move into the Derby field. They said they'd kind of already set their sights on the Preakness, and they liked the timing to the Preakness and whatnot, so they were up in the air. Well, advanced wagering for the Derby kicked off, I believe, at 9 o'clock, so the decision had to be made sometime prior to that, and according to what we've heard, Pablo Del Monte now out, but again, double check on that if that's a horse that you want to throw into your mix. And I found it strange yesterday when they were a little bit on the fence, because obviously they put the horse in the entry box, and that's how it got on the AE list, and that was only a couple of days ago that they essentially had to make that decision. So it was a little bit funny that the connections of Pablo Del Monte chose not to run. But again, they like the timing. Preakness is coming up around the corner, so I guess that'll be the game plan for Pablo Del Monte. So now a field of 19 set to go in the Kentucky Derby. Another defection from the weekend stakes, not the Derby itself, but another notable defection from this afternoon's Grade 2 Ali Sheba down at Churchill Downs. Normandy Invasion has scratched for Chad Brown and Fox Hill Farm. Normandy Invasion came up with a little quarter crack after training on Thursday. Chad Brown said the horse had a routine gallop yesterday and went terrific, but then they discovered cooling out that he'd popped a quarter crack. They're now pointing towards the Grade 1 Metropolitan Mile, June 7th at Belmont, and Chad says it's a minor issue, but the timing is terrible. They're going to put a patch on it, monitor it, and Chad expects to train up to the Metropolitan Mile. But again, Normandy Invasion scratched out of this afternoon's Ali Sheba at Churchill Downs. Wicked Strong, this is kind of interesting. Jimmy Jerkins, I'm sure, picking up for his father, Alan Jerkins, an old school trainer. Jimmy Jerkins blows out Wicked Strong 3 furlongs yesterday. So really right on top of the race, a 3 furlong lung stretcher, so to speak, 36.78 down at Churchill Downs. And Jerkins, in fact, said open up his lungs a little bit, long way, 1.25 miles. And so had to work and then went a little bit longer than that. Again, kind of old school, Wicked Strong out on the track yesterday for a little bit of a workout for Jimmy Jerkins. This weekend, we're in that transition, the final part of the transition period from the winter tracks to the spring, summer tracks. And Suffolk Downs will be opening up this weekend. Arlington Park is going to be opening. But Suffolk, we have to keep our eyes out there. We've certainly talked about it a number of times. But Suffolk is in a little bit of a battle right now. They have the potential to get expanded gaming there and put a casino on their property, and that was a dicey situation going back a couple of months ago, as their property actually sits in 2 different municipalities. A line goes down their property. One municipality said no to the casino, the other said yes, and it's kind of in a quirky position on their property where I think they'd have to tear down some of the barns, but they're willing to do that to put up a casino. So Suffolk Downs now in the running for a casino up there, but there is at least one other group. Steve Wynn has a group that's also looking for a casino. So I think it's these two that are matching up. But given that, the folks at Suffolk have said, essentially, if they don't get the casino, this could be the last season of racing at Suffolk Downs. So Suffolk will open tomorrow for the 2014 meet. They're opening up a little early, trying to get as much racing as possible before that casino decision is made. The decision was actually, I believe, was supposed to be made already, and I'm just looking. Yeah, they were supposed to make the award in February, but it's been pushed back several times due to procedural and political issues, according to a Racing Form article, and the date is now undetermined. But eventually, that decision will be made. And so again, we'll keep our eyes on this. It's right around the corner for us, Massachusetts neighbors, and certainly in my lifetime of being a racing fan, I've seen Rockingham disappear from the racing landscape. You've seen the Massachusetts fairs disappear from the landscape, and so it'd be sad if Suffolk went. Like Rockingham, there is a very nice history of racing there with some very important races, maybe not in recent memory, but going back a ways. And I think there potentially, if they had the casino, there could be a little bit of a resurgence up there at Suffolk. So we'll see what happens. Again, it's something that will be decided. It's undetermined, but I'm sure it's the foreseeable future, and so we'll keep our eyes on Massachusetts and the future of Suffolk Downs. But again, they will be opening for the 2014 season on Saturday. The Jockey Club pressing forward with their request for connections to put out vet records, particularly given this weekend. There's a Matt Haggerty article in the Racing Form talking about the representatives from the Jockey Club that will this morning contact the owners and trainers of horses entered in the Oaks and the Derby that have pledged to make their horses' vet records publicly available. Some have, some haven't. There's some situations where some ownership folks have said we will, but they're in partnership on horses with other folks who haven't committed, so there's a situation there. But the plan is to acquire 14 days worth of vet records and make them publicly available, put them on it's not the Jockey Club website. It's a website essentially funded by the Jockey Club called HorseRacingReform.com. So I'm not quite sure when those would be up. You would have to think probably sometime today. If they're going out getting records for the Oaks and the Derby this morning, they would probably try to turn that around as fast as possible. But again, this is kind of new, so I don't know what the game plan is exactly. But the website, again, HorseRacingReform.com. And eventually the game plan is to push for all the connections in big races like this to put up 14 days worth of vet records and let the public see what the situation is there. And another outgrowth of the PETA Asmussen controversy going back a couple of months from the New York Times. And this week there's been certainly some coverage of that. It's going to be interesting to see how NBC addresses that over the weekend. But again, some of the media certainly has touched on that the last few days as they've looked at the run-up to the Kentucky Derby. Speaking of Kentucky Derby and races on the weekend that are not the Kentucky Derby that maybe have some Kentucky Derby connections, interesting tomorrow, the feature race at Gulfstream, the 9th race at Gulfstream tomorrow, going off at about 5:33. $75,000 purse. It's a 1-mile stakes race named the Sir Bear, and it's notable because Social Inclusion is in there, who was on the outside looking in when it came to the Kentucky Derby. That photo finish for second in the Wood Memorial was enough to knock him out points-wise. If he had finished second in the Wood Memorial, it is certainly likely Social Inclusion would have been in the Kentucky Derby tomorrow and certainly would have been a pace factor, but instead will prep for the Preakness in tomorrow's Sir Bear. Again, an ungraded stake for $75,000 at Gulfstream. 8 horses entered. Social Inclusion is the 4-5 favorite, and just looking at the past performances, clearly is the one to beat. A couple other horses in there. Little Daddy comes off of a couple of nice wins in the first 2 starts of the career with okay Beyer figures. CZ has been racing in some stakes races for 3-year-olds down in Florida this winter and has shown maybe a little bit of ability. Big Guy Ian comes out of an optional claiming race with a decent Beyer figure. The finishing position wasn't much. And East Hall has been in some of those 3-year-old races down in Florida as well this winter, not particularly being up in the hunt, but the Beyer figures were okay. Again, it looks like it's social inclusion's race and maybe is a little bit of a paid workout for the Preakness. But as I say, if you're watching the races tomorrow, scheduled post time about 5:53 down at Gulfstream. You can take a look and see what social inclusion does. Misses the Derby, but we'll be getting in a little prep race on Derby Day down at Gulfstream in anticipation of the Preakness. We had our Derby seminar last night, and I tossed out some stats, so I have them available here. I'll throw them out to you as well, and maybe this can play into some of your final thinking and handicapping in anticipation of the Derby tomorrow. The Kentucky Derby jockeys, if this is important to you, jockeys who are complete Kentucky Derby rookies, there are a handful of them, maybe half a dozen or so. Just run down those quickly. Corey Lanerie, and this is hard to believe. Lanerie certainly riding very well at Churchill Downs over the past couple of seasons or so. He's on Harry's Holiday, so it's his first Derby mount. I think he's stuck in a little bit of a tough situation on Harry's Holiday. Samrat with Jose Ortiz. Jose Ortiz's first Derby mount. Ricardo Santana on Tapiture, his first Derby mount. The other Ortiz brother, Irad, will be on Uncle Si, and Joe Rocco on Vince Ramos. Those are the jockeys who will be making their first try at the Kentucky Derby. And it does, it is a different animal. It's a big event, 100,000 in the crowd, and everybody wants to win a Derby, so I think the first one, the Butterflies may be going. But a guy like Lanerie and a guy like Rocco, they've been around enough. And then the Ortiz brothers, certainly they're young guys, so the Butterflies would be flying. But I think they're both kind of talented up-and-comers that I think will ride okay. So for me, just looking at the Derby rookies, I'm not, that didn't shake up anything in my handicapping, positive or negative, but we'll toss it out there. I want to toss out one more note. And this is going back again to the days when I first got into the game. There was the dual qualifiers, which when I first started playing the sport, the dual qualifiers, you had to pay attention to that in the Kentucky Derby. It had a certain significance, and if you're not familiar, dual qualifiers, it's a formula based mainly on breeding. There's the dosage index, which is based on breeding, and that has to reach a certain level. And then these horses have to be within 10 pounds of the top weight on the experimental free handicap that comes out at the beginning of the year, looking back at the 2-year-old season. And again, dual qualifiers back in the day were horses that you really had to pay attention to, and typically the winner of the Derby was a dual qualifier. This year's dual qualifiers, and again, over the past 10 years or so, it's kind of fallen out of favor. But there are 3 dual qualifiers this year. If that's something that you're still interested in, Dance with Fate, We Miss Artie, and Tapiture. The 3 dual qualifiers in 2014 heading into the Kentucky Derby. And speaking of breeding, we will talk some breeding right after the first break. We're going to be joined by Sid Fernando, president of Work Thoroughbred Consultants. We're going to talk some Derby pedigree with him right after this. Coming up a little later on, we'll be joined by Gary West of ESPN.com, a guy who's completely keyed into the 3-year-old picture down in Louisville. We'll get some thoughts from him on Derby as well. So Derby conversation coming up. First, we're going to talk pedigree with Sid Fernando right after this.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right. The 2014 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2015 Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month's contest is the Triple Threat on May 10th. So sign up today, online at CapitalOTB.com, or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. With a newly designed and engineered internet wagering platform, enhanced video streaming, additional funding options, and 3 new individual wagering opportunities, CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. Combine that with our all-new mobile website. You have 2 of the most powerful, innovative, and advanced wagering platforms available today. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
It's called the fastest 2 minutes in sports, and the tradition continues Saturday, May 3rd with the 140th running of the Kentucky Derby. If you can't make it to the Clubhouse Racebook in Albany, you can still be a part of the action by visiting one of our many Easy Bet or branch locations conveniently located throughout upstate New York. For a complete list of our Easy Bet and branch locations, log on to CapitalOTB.com. Capital OTB and CapitalOTBBet.com. The most convenient ways to wager on all the Triple Crown races.
I'm Anthony Mormino. Join me weekdays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the day in racing. That's the Handicappers Report, weekdays at 9, only on the OTB TV network.
This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. Very happy to be joined now by Sid Fernando, president of Work Thoroughbred Consultants. You can find more information at their website, enix.com. Good morning, Sid.
Good morning, Seth. How you doing?
Pretty good. Before I get started, I always like to give you a chance just to fill people in. Tell them a little more about Work Thoroughbred Consultants and what you do for the industry.
Well, we're pedigree consultants on our site. You can, get nicks of mares with stallions that are, they're free actually because the stallion owners pay to have the stallions registered. So anyone can actually just go to enix.com, and if a stallion's registered, you can take your mare and you can run a nick and find out a bunch of great pedigree information about your mare and how she fits with a particular stallion.
Excellent. And Sid, speaking of pedigrees, and before we get into actually talking about some specifics, I just want to mention, because I talked about it just at the top of the show before we had you on, I pulled up the dual qualifiers for this year, and I said, and you're probably in the same boat, when I first got into the game, you really kind of had to pay attention to that. The dosage and the dual qualifiers, they've kind of fallen out of favor. There are 3 dual qualifiers this year, Dance with Fate, We Miss Artie, and Tapiture. Do you pay any attention to that anymore?
I don't because, and I think it's a good thing. What it was good because for a long time, good 2-year-old form was required along with the dosage. But what's happening, Seth, is that more and more the Derby winners. There's only been one Grade 1 winner among Derby winners the last 10 years. So the horses aren't as well. The well-raised 2-year-olds aren't turning around and going into the classics. You get lower-raised 2-year-olds, so they're not within 10 pounds of the qualifier anymore,
Yeah, it is definitely, as I say, it's fallen out of favor, and as you know, it may have plenty to do with 21st century training and just the way that has changed over the past 15 years or so. All right, Sid, you got 3 for us that you're going to take a look at that you find interesting in the Derby on the weekend, and we'll talk a little bit of breeding and pedigree on those as they move forward into the 1.25 mile different kind of a situation than they've had before tomorrow afternoon. First up, we're going to talk a little bit about Danza, and while we do that, we're going to look at the Arkansas Derby. I like Danza, and off of this effort, he's just, lightly raced, does have some 2-year-old form, though, and it looks like, improved going around 2 turns, and maybe just getting right at the right time by Street Boss, Champagne Royale. Champagne Royale also has produced Majestic Harbor. So some interesting breeding there. But again, while we watch the Arkansas Derby and the win by Danza, give us some of your thoughts vis-a-vis the pedigree here.
Sure. On Enix, it's an A-Nick. This horse, as you mentioned, is by a sprinter, Street Boss, but he's by Street Cry, who's a horse, the sire of Zenyatta and Street Sense. He gets you everything. And the dam is the key here. She's produced, as you said, the horse that won the Grade 3 at 12 furlongs at turf. Another horse that she's also produced that people don't know here. Another horse of hers racing in Europe has won over 11 furlongs at turf in Europe, which translates to like 12 here. So she's produced 2 horses already that have won route form is not surprising given the female family.
And let me ask you a question about breeding and 21st century, as we say. It seems like, I don't know, maybe there isn't as much distance pedigree out there to begin with now. So just as you handicap a race like the Derby and horses going 1.25 miles for the first time, do you have to shift the way you look at it?
Yeah, you do. And in fact, I've mentioned this quite a bit to people. You know, basically, you're right. What's happening is that most horses in this country nowadays are really bred for 1.16 miles to 9 furlongs. That's where all the stakes races are, right? Every weekend, 1.16 miles or 9 furlongs. So this is a 10 furlong race, and you know, when I went through every horse in this race, I kind of put down my own figures. I said this is a 9 furlong max or whatnot. For Danza, I put down this horse will stay 10 furlongs. There's a horse bred on the similar nick named Cigar Street, same cross. He won at 9.5 furlongs, 1 mile and 3/16. So yeah, you really do have to take a look at it that way, assess. It's not like in days past where you had so much stamina that there were differences, you know, where you could really tell a speed horse from a horse that stays. Now they're all pretty much the same.
Yeah. Oh, and so that edge you may have had, as I say, when I first got into the game and played into those Doshitz kind of figures.
Right.
There are some horses that just kind of separated themselves out a little bit, maybe on that stamina, but it is a little bit different now.
It is. It's much more homogeneous now.
All right, let's shift our attention now to another horse. And besides the pedigree for distance, this horse is maybe a little bit interesting on the surface, and we'll take a look at Medal Count. And it's also interesting, Sid, over the past week, this horse, for folks I have talked to here on the show, Medal Count is getting a little bit of buzz, and it's doubly interesting because the same thing happened last year before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Medal Count had a little bit of buzz, but moved over to the dirt off the synthetic that day in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and didn't show much. And so people are now a little dicey on the dirt element with Medal Count. But we're going to take a look back while we talk and watch the Bluegrass. And it will be Dance with Fate winning, but it will be the number 13 Medal Count finishing second. This was only a week after he'd won the Transylvania at Keeneland. And coming off of that effort, Dale Roman said, well, we'll go in the Bluegrass and see if we can get points because I think we'd like to go in the Derby. Subsequently, the second place finish was enough to do that. But again, Transylvania and the Bluegrass were on the synthetics. So the question mark with this guy maybe is the dirt, given what he's done before on that surface. So we have Dynaformer on top, Brisket, and Unbridled Songmayor on the bottom. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the horse is by a sire, Dynaformer, who's already had a Derby winner in Barbara. The horse trains at Churchill Downs. He trains extremely well there. He won his first race at Ellis off the turf, so he's won on dirt before. He had a deceptively decent race, won fifth in Florida on a very speed-favoring track. The key with this horse is they've changed his running style. His dam was a pretty... This pedigree is almost what I just told you before, the opposite of Danza. Now you have a speed mare by Unbridled Song who only won... She won from 5.5 to 6.5 furlongs of turf and dirt, being bred to one of the great stamina sires in the United States, Dynaform. Exactly the opposite of Danza, which is a street boss breed horse bred to a stamina mare. Here, what you have though with Medal Count is a horse that the Roberta line of Dynaform is just incredible for stamina, and they've changed his running style now from stalking to really closing, as you can see from the Bluegrass. And with the shift in style, I think that's going to help this horse. I think a lot of horses, synthetic horses, obviously take to Churchill Downs, you know, whether that's anecdotal or not, we've seen it happen. And we remember those horses that do. And, you know, this horse should be closing. They're very bullish on him there at his home track, and I think he's really bred to stay the trip. I have 10 furlongs next to this horse.
And also, you look down at the workouts, which are over dirt, and those are all very good too. So, you look at the past performances, the 2 dirt races. He may have been up against the Speed Bias in the Fountain of Youth, and again, it's it just didn't go his way in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But you may be fooled by the past performances. This horse might be better on dirt than it appears on the page.
And another thing, Seth, that you point out is that even though he won at 2, Dynaformers are not meant to race at 2. They are big physical horses, and they mature late. But whatever he did at 2, you can throw out the window with the Dynaformer, because they just continue to improve as they get bigger, and they have just late maturing characteristics. And so this horse is just starting to get rolling right now. And that's the other thing you look at, from a pedigree and breeding standpoint, is what are the characteristics of these sire lines? And say, there are some horses that are 2-year-old horses that mature early and they're done. This is the opposite. This horse is bred to mature much later.
All right, let's shift our attention now out to Southern California and get some ideas on the horse that is certainly going to be the favorite on Saturday. That's California Chrome, and I'm going to be interested to hear your pedigree ideas there, because I don't think he's quite the blue blood. We're looking at some of the other horses in the field. By Lucky Pulpit, out of a mare, Love the Chase, by Not for Love. California Chrome, as we talk here, we will watch his nice win in the Santa Anita Derby. And pedigree or not, he just has looked great in these last 4 races. Question mark here is, can he put another big effort together? But again, also at the 1.25 miles. What are your thoughts?
Well, like you said, he doesn't have anything on pedigree on the surface of it, but the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th dams, they're extremely powerfully bred for stamina. Sires, as you'll recall, like Sir Ivor, Rebo, Prince Willow, all of those vaguely nobles, they're the sires of the 3rd, 4th, 5th dams, 6th dams. Then the Broodmare sire, Not for Love, and 2nd dam, Polish Numbers, speedier horses by Mr. Prospector and Danzig Standing in Maryland, but they were bred by the Phippses. They're both from the same family of Numbered Account, which is the same family as Super Saver, the Kentucky Derby winner. The sire line, Lucky Pulpit, he's a pulpit from the AP Indy line, and he's very closely related to Unbridled Song, same female family. There are a lot of elements, not on the surface, but deep within it. There's enough. He's already shown he's a freak that can win at 9 furlongs, especially if he has his way. The weather's supposed to be really good there. He hasn't apparently trained well on the choppy, wet track so far, but from what I've gathered, it takes a while to warm up. He's a little ouchy when he gets on there. The weather Saturday is supposed to be like it was in that video at Santa Anita. If he gets that type of track and the weather and whatnot, I think he's going to be in the top 3. I think you have to ignore him at your own peril. So I like those 3 basically, and you can throw in a couple others, Chitu and Uncle Si on pedigree, female family, and you got 5 horses there you can play around with, in my opinion.
Let me throw one out there, the horse that I'm using on top, and I'll get your opinion there, and feel free to give me a thumbs down if that's what you think, but I'm leaning towards Intense Holiday.
Here's what Intense Holiday is by Harlan's Holiday. And, Harlan's Holiday sired a bunch of top horses, including the 2-year-old champion, what was the name, Bobby?
Yeah, I can't.
Just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I know who you mean by kid.
Yeah. I mean, I think you get a lot of class with him. I just don't think that sire gets horses that stay. And that sire line, Into Mischief, Harlan's Holiday. Harlan himself was a sprinter. Harlan's Holiday stayed, obviously, 9 furlongs. That's the one thing I would go against on your horse. Of course, who knows what can happen. But I'll give you the thumbs down on that.
Okay. Yeah, like I say, feel free to do it either way. I appreciate that. But Sid, just to, once again, juggle those up. You were saying before we went on the air, medal count may be the way you're going to go.
Yeah, I think I like. What I like here. I think I'm going to. Actually, I'm staying away from the race, but I would advise people who are betting to a $20 exacta box of the 3 horses. Medal count, Danza and California Chrome boxed, and then you can use the other 2 horses. I said Chitu and Uncle Si, big bombs. Anywhere you want, an exotic or whatnot, other combinations. One other thing I did want to tell you about Intense Holiday, like your horse that you mentioned, just so that one last bit about it, like Medal Count, his dam is also by Unbridled Song. And Crafty Shaw is under the second dam. He was a 9-furlong winner. I mean, it's not all lost, but, just one little added comment.
A little hope. I like that.
Yeah.
Sid, before I let you go, any thoughts on the Oaks this afternoon? Is this just all going to go through Untappable?
No. In fact, I'm our client, Mr. 50, has Unbridled Forever in the race.
Oh, okay.
So, we're kind of obviously, you got to take this, I'm a biased observer on this, obviously, but I happen to know her quite well. I was there from the planning stages when Mr. 50 planned the mating. I bought the seasons for him to Unbridled Song. I've been following this filly all along. I speak to Dallas Stewart. Dallas said, excuse me, he just didn't know how tight to have her in Louisiana because she hadn't run in a while. He had skipped the one race. She won there, and then he came back to Stays Untappable. Didn't know how tight she was. Excuse me. And she ended up being short that day. He said the filly loved Churchill Downs. He's trained extraordinarily well here. He's really put the screws down on her, and he expects her to run huge. And I would say there's going to be a good shot because Mr. 50 doesn't usually come in for a lot of races. He's flying in from Canada with a party of 20 for this race. And usually when he flies in, like he did for Perfect Girls Breeders' Cup, he was big odds, or Jerseytown, Cigar Mile, when he was big odds. Usually when he does, the trainers pretty much told him, Mr. 50, you better be here for this one. So that's another added factor in Unbridled Forever.
Interesting. And as you say, this is a horse that won the Silver Bullet Day, and at that point looked really, really promising. And if you look at the past performances, it does look like that last start off a couple of months just was maybe a little bit short. And
he didn't know how much. He told me that. He felt like he just didn't have her tight enough. By the way, speaking of Unbridled Song, she's by Unbridled Song, too. And her dam, Lemons Forever, won the same race.
Yeah, and I had a couple of little check marks against that one. For me, Untappable looks pretty good, but in that outside post, you can make a little knock there, and so some of the other ones were interesting, one of those being Unbridled Forever, and that was my thinking there. Off the 2-month layoff, I think that race maybe looks worse than it actually was, and so that was a horse I certainly had in the mix, so nice to hear some comments on that one as well.
Of course, it's a biased view on my part.
Yeah, we understand, but worthwhile so perhaps. We'll see how it works out this afternoon, but we wish you and Mr. 50 luck on that one in the Oaks. And again, that'll be run this afternoon. Tomorrow, the Derby. Hopefully, we gave out some good information. And Sid, we absolutely appreciate the visit. I'll remind folks again, you are the president of Work Thoroughbred Consultants. You can find more information at the enix.com website. Again, Sid, thanks for the input.
Thank you, Steph, and best of luck to you and your listeners.
Appreciate it. Sid Fernando from Work Thoroughbred Consultants. We'll take our next break. When we come back, Gary West from ESPN.com. Stay tuned.
This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Casano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network.
Funding your Capital OTB bet account is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Easy Money. Clearly the fastest and easiest method of depositing funds into your account. Make deposits or withdrawals in just minutes. 2. Green Dot Money Pack. Gives you instant access to your funds. Green Dot Money Packs are available at thousands of retailers nationwide. And 3. MasterCard Visa. Simply click on the link from the funding page, enter your account information, and fund your account. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
It's called the fastest 2 minutes in sports, and the tradition continues Saturday, May 3rd with the 140th running of the Kentucky Derby. And there's only one place to watch it, the Clubhouse Racebook. To be a part of the excitement, reserve your seat today by calling 446-4010.
Welcome back. Always happy to be joined by Gary West of ESPN.com. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Seth. How are you doing?
Very good. And Gary is down in Louisville for the Kentucky Derby and the Oaks weekend as well. And that means live on track and tapped in to all the news and information. And Gary, I got a little heads up. I haven't reported it yet, but since you're down there live, I'll let you confirm it. We heard earlier today that Pablo Del Monte, the Connections, have opted not to accept the invitation, so that there's now a field of 19, and that means a unique decision regarding the starting gate.
Yes, it does. And, you know, Pablo Del Monte was not a contender, but his withdrawal, I certainly think, affects the race for two reasons. First of all, he would have been a pace factor from the number 20 hole. They would have had descending. Second of all, with his scratch, they can now move the horses to the right one stall, meaning there's no longer going to be the use of the one stall in the starting gate. And that is significant because that is a very difficult place to leave the gate, because there's a little bit of a dog leg there coming out of the chute. And for that reason, the one horse, if he were to go perfectly straight coming out of the gate, he'd actually hit the rail. So he's got to get over out a little bit. And there's such a scramble that the one hole in the Derby is, when there's a 20-horse field, is just a horrible, horrible place to begin. So that does affect Vickers in trouble. He's not nearly in as much trouble as he was yesterday.
Yeah, that's a great decision to move him out with the removal of one horse, move all the horses out so that one hole doesn't come into play, because that's what makes it the dreaded one hole. It's that fact that you have to move right coming out. You don't have any chance. You're going to run into the rail. So Vickers in trouble. If folks like that one, maybe a little bit of good news there. Still, you got to negotiate a little bit from the one hole, but it's not as bad as it was before. And Gary, you're down there in Louisville, and I've mentioned before on the show, you're a guy who is completely tuned into workouts, and workouts for you are a little more believing the eye than believing the clock, and you've said that a number of times before because you like the way they do it more than the time that comes up.
Right.
So being down there over the past few days, I'm wondering if anyone has jumped out at you in the morning.
Well, there have been, to my eye, about 4 or 5 horses that have stood out this week. I'll start with the filly, who's running today, of course, Untappable. Her workout, I think it was in the slop on Sunday. It was just outstanding. It's certainly one of the best moves of the week, maybe the best move of the week, although it was just 48 and change. She was not asked to run a step, and she came to the pole just full of energy, bursting to begin her activity, and she was difficult to pull up, galloped out strongly. She just looked sensational. A couple other moves from the Tom Fletcher stable. I thought two of his looked very good. Danza worked in company with Vince Ramos, and Danza only finished about a length in front, but it was the way he did it that impressed me. Coming down the lane, he was, again, full of energy, and right before the wire, I guess just inside the 16th hole, the exercise rider, or actually it was John Velasquez, asked him to run just a little bit, moved his hands, and he spurted away from Vince Ramos. I mean, in a blink of an eye, he went from being alongside to being a length in front. And then he galloped out strongly. So I thought that was a very, very good move. And, of course, the one that I think created the most buzz this week was Intense Holiday's half-mile breeze that same morning. He worked in company with Wee Miss Artie. Wee Miss Artie wasn't very energetic or enthusiastic about working that morning, and Intense Holiday was. And so it was a one-sided affair. Intense Holiday blew by him in the lane and galloped out strongly. He was striding out very well. I think he's going to run huge. And another horse that I was very impressed with and came here with no preconception, and he really wasn't even on my radar, was Metal Count. And, of course, Metal Count's the runner-up from the Bluegrass. He had I think it was a 5/8 or a 3/4 mile work. I forget which now. But he galloped out very strongly. Looked like he was well within himself, and he's getting over the ground very, very well. He's just not a synthetic horse. Most of his big efforts, of course, were at Keeneland's, over Keeneland's synthetic surface, but this horse can handle the dirt. Now, whether he handles the kickback is another issue, but he certainly gets over the ground well. Another issue is he's going to be making his third start, I think, in a short time. And he's coming back after the Bluegrass in 3 weeks. I think he ran 2 weeks before that, so we'll have 3 races in, I believe, 5 weeks. And there would be some concern usually about how those races had an impact on him and whether they drained him of energy, strength, and he lost weight. But he looks great, and he's probably one of those horses who just thrives on activity. And I think Metal Count, if he handles the kickback, is going to run very well also.
Metal Count is now becoming very interesting to me. And I've mentioned this just earlier on the show. We did the Kentucky Derby seminar here in Albany last night, and my partner on the panel was Brian Nadeau of HorsePlayerNow.com. He's got Metal Count on top. Just prior to having you on this show, I had Sid Fernando, the pedigree consultant. He likes Metal Count. And I've had a couple other people on the show this week who have mentioned him. And I talked about already, he had this same kind of interesting buzz last year before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Didn't live up to it that day, but maybe gets a chance to validate the wise guy label in the Kentucky Derby because, as they say, there's been some buzz. So he's certainly an interesting horse heading into tomorrow, and I think the odds will justify that. Although getting the buzz, now I'm going to be interested to see where the betting public goes with Metal Count.
Yeah, I will be too. His trainer, Dale Romans, has been talking about this horse well since he was a 2-year-old. He said this could be one of the best horses he's ever had, and he just didn't quite make good on that potential, but he's making Dale look like a prophet now because the last 2 races have been outstanding.
And Gary, you also mentioned the nice workout from Intense Holiday, and that's a good segue because I pulled up the Louisiana Derby to take a look at. We'll watch Vickers in Trouble win this race. The number 6 horse, number 1 Intense Holiday, will run second as the favorite, coming off of the win in the Risen Star. And I looked at, you're one of the poll voters on the ESPN poll, as am I, and I looked at your vote. You've got Intense Holiday at number 5 on your most recent ballot. And I have them on top, so I wanted to get some opinions from you. We talked a little bit about this last night at the seminar. Maybe pace-wise, this race didn't fall into his wheelhouse necessarily. Vickers in Trouble got the first jump. Maybe a little bit of a regression off of the Risen Star that may allow him to move forward on Saturday. But give me some of your thoughts on Intense Holiday.
Well, certainly the pace was a factor there in his runner-up finish. And Vickers in Trouble got away with very casual fractions there. But the main reason he ran second, and it's strange, isn't it, to say that's a poor effort, is that he had some trouble. In the turn, he got bumped around, and then when he turned into the stretch, he ducked in, and he ran into the whip. And he switched over to his left lead. Actually, he was misfiring or cross-firing. He was on his left lead in front, on his right lead in behind, and was looking very awkward, and finally got straightened out about the 8th hole and finished okay. So he needs to obviously avoid that. And whether that was a mental problem or something physical, I don't know. But he hasn't done it. He certainly didn't do it in the workout. And I know he has cross-fired in gallops a couple of times, but I think they have that straightened out now. And if so, I think he's a very formidable horse. The Kentucky Derby, as I often point out, is won in the second turn. You have to make your move in the turn. You can't just wait for the stretch generally. And he runs the turn exceptionally well, as he showed in the Risen Star, as you remember, since, you have number one, you remember very vividly that Risen Star move in the turn where he was rolling around horses and just blew to the lead in the stretch. I thought that was a dynamic performance, and he was actually going to make that move in the turn in the Louisiana Derby as well until he had trouble.
And if people want to see what Gary's talking about, just go back and look at the aerial shot of last year's Derby and look what Orb was doing on the turn. I agree completely. You want to be in real good striking position when you hit the head of the stretch. You don't want to wait to then to make the move. And so, I certainly hope that is the case tomorrow with Intense Holiday. Gary, also going to your list, as I mentioned, you had Intense Holiday at number 5, but Opportunity scratched out, and he was above, so Intense Holiday actually would have moved up to 4. At 4, but moving up to 3, Wicked Strong, and while we talk, we're going to take a look at the Wood Memorial. Wicked Strong, the number 2 horse, will win. Number 8, Samrot, will run second. They're both in the Derby tomorrow. But Gary, the ESPN poll came out early in the week, or the end of the weekend actually, had to have the votes in. Subsequently, the post positions have been drawn. What do you think of Wicked Strong now in the outside post position?
Well, I still like him, not necessarily to win, but I think he's going to run well. He had a little blowout yesterday morning. He's looked good here, and he's a horse who's coming around at the right time. My only hesitation about him isn't really the post position, because I think he's basically going to drop back to mid-pack or farther back and make a late run. But most of his running in the wood, he did down the stretch. And as we just talked about, he needs to make that move in the turn. If he's able to do that effectively, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Jimmy Jerkins in the winner's circle. And many people subscribe to the theory that some deity is in charge of the Kentucky Derby, and I think the gods would certainly smile if this horse were to win.
Yeah, it's nice to see the Jerkins fan. And I'm always amazed, being a New York guy and around New York racing and up in Saratoga as much as I am, I'm used to that Alan Jerkins cadence of talking. And during the NBC post draw the other day, they interviewed Jimmy Jerkins, and he's got that same manner of talking that his dad does. And so that makes it kind of fun, too.
Yeah, I of course, like many people, have knelt at the Jerkins altar at Saratoga and just listened to him reminisce about some of those great moments. And one of the great horsemen ever to tighten the girth, and it would be great to see the Jerkins family in the winner's circle.
Absolutely. And Gary, before we move away from the Derby, time to pull the trigger now. Again, going back to your ESPN poll that came out. As I say, we had to vote on that on Sunday. You had California Chrome, you had Opportunity second, but that one scratched out now. Then Danza, and as I mentioned before, Wicked Strong, Intense Holiday, and at that point your top 5 would also include Medal Count on the scratch of Opportunity. But again, now post positions have been drawn. We're 5 days later. Have you shaken things up? Which direction are you going to go in tomorrow?
Well, I'm going to take the most profitable approach. At 2.5 to 1, I don't think the favorite California Chrome is very enticing, because at those odds, of course, you have to ask yourself, is the chance of his winning about 33% in a 20-horse field with all these circumstances and activities in this unique situation? I wouldn't take 2.5 to 1 on almost anybody. So I'm going to approach this race with saying to myself, if California Chrome wins, I'll applaud him and welcome this great horse to the winner's circle. And it would be a popular victory. But at the same time, as a horse player, I think I'm going to toss him and go with Intense Holiday, Danza, Wicked Strong, and Medal Count.
Very good. Other than medal count, I've got your 4 in my mix as well. But as I say, I may be shifting my my ideas on medal count after listening to the guests this week. So very interesting. And Gary, before we let you go, we want to touch on the Oaks. You had a great column on the ESPN website. We would always tell people to visit ESPN.com in the horse racing section. Gary has some great work on there regularly, and I try to link as much as I can to it on Equidaily as well. But you had an article about Untappable, how talented she is, and the the Oaks may be a crowning achievement. Did get stuck in the outside post position, being number 13. What are your feelings on her given that? And while we talk, just going to go back and take a look at that Fairground Oaks, where she was so impressive, winning down there back on March 29th. So again, the Oaks this afternoon, going to be the highlight of the day. I think it goes through Untappable, but it is a fun race with horses like Sugar Shock, Rosalind. I think Thank You, Mary Lou is a very, very interesting long shot in there. And then my Miss Sophia and Fashion Plate as well as the others. Strong field, but she looks like a really special horse.
Yes, she does. And, great horses overcome circumstances. And it'll be a challenge for her today to come out of the number 13 hole and win this. But I think she's up to that. She has been sensational and just appears to be several lengths better than her competition here. So I'm excited about this. It could be a coronation. She could be one of the best 3-year-old fillies we've seen since Rachel Alexandra. And I will surely get the opportunity to prove it today, as Rachel did back in 2009. She could be, in fact, one of the best 3-year-olds in the country, regardless of gender. So Untappable gets the big test today, coming out of the 13 hole. I like the other fillies you mentioned as well. One more, though, that I would add to that group is Ria Antonia. She had a very good workout here. I think it was Sunday for Baffert. And I think Bob Baffert's got her ready to return to her top form. Whether that's good enough to win, I don't know, but I think she's a live horse in the race.
Very good. And Gary, we'll let you go now, but we certainly appreciate the visit, and good luck over the next couple of days. Enjoy the racing. I'm envious. Should be fun down there. What's the weather like this morning, and what are they talking about over the next couple of days?
Well, right now it's a little cool. It's been cool all week, actually. I understand there is a chance of rain today, but I don't see any rain in the sky, which I'm staring at right now. And I think we're good to go tomorrow.
Sounds good. Again, Gary, thanks for the visit, and certainly we'll check in over the next couple of weeks as the Triple Crown progresses.
Thank you, Seth. Always a pleasure.
Gary West from ESPN.com. A little bit earlier, we had Sid Fernando from Work Thoroughbred Consultants. That brings us to the end of Racing Across America for this Friday morning and ending this week leading into Oaks Derby weekend. I'll tell you, enjoy the weekend. You got 2 great days of stakes racing. We kind of lead up to it and have led up to it all year long here on the show, talking 3-year-olds plenty of times with our various guests like a Gary West, certainly on a weekly basis, Jeremy Plonk. Speaking of which, Jeremy mentioned it on Wednesday, but their Horse Player magazine, the May edition, has come out and is online now with a lot of great Derby information. I have it linked on Equidaily, but you can go straight to horseplayernow.com to pick up that. But hopefully we've laid the groundwork and done a little extra groundwork this week vis-a-vis the Oaks and the Derby and some of the other stakes races on those cards. Really enjoy the weekend. Whether you're sitting at home playing on capitalotbbet.com or come on down here to the Clubhouse Racebook or your local branch. And again, the Clubhouse Racebook tomorrow should be a lot of fun right here, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. 4 o'clock, they have that Derby bet giveaway for 5 lucky patrons and a lot of other great things going on all day long. So again, if you want to join a crowd, come on down here, go to your local branch or whatever. But if you're sitting at home, also enjoy capitalotbbet.com. More importantly, let's all cash some tickets and have some fun. One more program reminder again, because of the early post time. Tomorrow, Handicapper Support will kick things off at 8 a.m. Mark Casano and Down the Stretch will be at 9 a.m., so everything moves up an hour tomorrow. Weekend programming does continue, though. Tomorrow at 8, back to the regular time, 9 for Handicapper Support on Sunday, and 10 for Loose on the Lead with myself and Steve Bick. But there will be great programming in the morning, and then, of course, all day long with Oaks and Derby action as well. So, again, enjoy the weekend. Let's all cash some tickets. We'll see you again next week.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.